This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत. बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
This is Bharat FM.
Good morning and welcome to this special and significant discussion organized by iOpen International and hosted by Bharat FM's various media platforms. My name is Mayank Chaya. Excuse my lack of attire, but I figured given the seriousness of the theme, sartorial excellence should not matter. Human trafficking, servitude, bonded and endangered labor are terms that together describe one of the lowest moral failings of the human race. They exist in one form or another across the world. The United States is no exception. It's against this abhorrent fact of our lives that Ambassador John Cotton Richmond has spent his entire career fighting against. Mr. Richmond currently serves as the United States Ambassador at Large to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. In October 2018, the Senate unanimously confirmed him, and President Trump appointed him to lead the U.S. global engagement to combat human trafficking and support the coordination of anti-trafficking efforts across the U.S. government. Ambassador Richmond comes to the highest position in the federal government, dedicated to combating human trafficking after a distinguished career in the global battle for freedom. He co-founded the Human Trafficking Institute that exists to decimate modern slavery at its source by empowering police and prosecutors to use victim-centered and trauma-informed methods to hold traffickers accountable and ensure survivors are treated with respect and care. Talking to him this morning is Mr. Harold D'Souza, president of iOpen International, which is a non-profit group focused on combating human trafficking through empowerment. It consults with various governments and develops methods of cultivating resilience, hope, and freedom in vulnerable populations. Mr. D'Souza brings to the debate a unique personal experience, having himself suffered some of the very hardship that he now fight against. Ambassador Richmond and Mr. D'Souza, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Mayank Chaya. I deeply appreciate you supporting our cause, and it means a lot to me and to the entire world in the globe. So having said that, I'll not take any time because every second of Ambassador John Richmond is very important to us and very crucial. And I just want to welcome Ambassador John Richmond, and I wanted to share with our viewers, because most of the viewers are from India, Asian countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, we have people from Mexico, and a lot of victims and survivors within the United States of America, especially the immigrants and human labor trafficking, which I'm focused on. I always talk about you because you are a very good human being. And I would like you to share first, maybe you can introduce yourself in your own way, but that coming to America, I always say that legally is heaven, but coming to America illegally is hell. And I want you to elaborate on that because people just think it is heaven and they pay the agents, like, they pay like anywhere from $40,000. And there are people who have paid $200,000 to come here illegally through the borders. So having said that, Ambassador John Richmond, I welcome you. Thank you very much for joining.
Harold, thank you. It was an irresistible opportunity, both to talk about India, a place that I love and got to live for several years with my family. Certainly care deeply about India and its work in terms of trying to make sure that people are free, that they get to make the most basic decisions about their lives. But you're absolutely right. When we think about the hope of freedom, when we think about the opportunity to go work somewhere, people will pay a great deal of money on the promise of that future hope. The challenge is traffickers are lying in wait. They are trying to prey on people's hopes. They know that people want a better life, and they should. And so traffickers spin a web of lies. They tell people that certain things will happen and then they don't occur. And they take people's money in the process and then ultimately exploit them, as you well know. And so what we want to be about as the United States government is fanning the flame of freedom, working with governments all over the world, from India, you mentioned Bangladesh, I was just visiting there, as well as Canada, Mexico, other countries that are represented on this meeting. We want to encourage all governments to do better, including our own. The United States still has a long way to go as well. And we're learning from other countries. So I'm grateful to you, Harold, for putting together this dialogue, and grateful to you in particular for your service on the United States Advisory Council on Trafficking in Persons. Appreciate your service there for 4 years and all the work that you've done.
Thank you, Ambassador. Having said that, like, I want you to share with our viewers is that, like, we are working, like, is there any way that, like, you travel all over the world and you're ambassador at large globally, internationally? We are working to collaborate. Like, I'm working especially right now in India to start an advisory council on human trafficking led by the survivors. So would you like to throw some light, and can you, like, share you are very powerful, like, you know, like, you can make things happen. And at the same breath, I've been thinking, like, can we or different countries have an ambassador like you in their own country? And what are your views, because you have been traveling, and any challenges that you face? Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm encouraged that there might be an advisory council of survivors in India. It's a great model. We've certainly benefited from it here in the United States. And as you well know, Harold, so many people worked really hard to make that happen. So I hope it does occur in India. I think other countries certainly could have an ambassador level position for trafficking in persons. You know, the way it started in the United States is back in 2000, right around the passing of the United Nations protocol around trafficking in persons. The US passed its comprehensive anti-trafficking statute that created this position. You know, when most people think about ambassadors, we think about ambassadors in residence. An ambassador goes to a specific country and represents the government on all variety of issues. But in the United States, there are 6 ambassadors at large. So not an ambassador to a specific place, but to all places, but not on all issues, but on one specific issue. And I'm incredibly grateful that the US government elevated trafficking in persons to this level. I do get to travel when there's not a pandemic, and get to engage countries on what they're doing, and have gotten a chance to see a great deal. And there are a couple of challenges that I'm seeing. One is that just not enough victims are being identified. If we look at the global estimate of 24.9 million victims in the world, and you look at the number of victims actually being identified and reported by governments or NGOs, there's a massive disparity. To put it this way, like, it's 0.4% of victims are being identified. We had 118,000 victims identified last year, but we had 24.9 million estimated victims, which means that 99.6% of victims go unidentified, and therefore they can't get services. We need to do better. We need to identify victims. Another challenge that we're seeing, Harold, is that once a trafficker is found, even if the trafficker is arrested, the chance that they would be held accountable is incredibly low. We're seeing a decline in global prosecutions of traffickers. It's incredibly concerning. In fact, it's 38% decline over the last 5 years all over the world. We're seeing traffickers operating with impunity. They continue to exploit people for profit, taking precious individuals, people that that have inherent value, and they're treating them like a commodity that's disposable. We must make sure that we both identify victims and hold the traffickers accountable, or else they'll just continue to generate more victims that need our improving survivor care.
Yeah, Ambassador John Richmond, I really love you. I think all victims and survivors globally love you, because for one reason, you're very honest. Because you said that, you know, that's very strong that you said the perpetrator's prosecution has reduced, which I totally agree, and when you say it. But can you, at the same breath, share with our viewers, especially in the United States of America, and that there are many people who are watching today, and when you say it, it means a lot, and because they are so scared. And I have started a freedom survey report for UI. So I've got more than 200 applicants here in Ohio only, who have not even called the hotline number. They're not even called for any NGOs or for any help, but they are victims of human labor trafficking. But they are so scared to ask for justice. They think they'll get deported. So would you like to share anything? If somebody comes, will they get deported? Will they get jailed? Because they have that very strong psychological fear by the perpetrators or by the traffickers. And when you say something within the law, I think that will encourage them to come out and talk, not only in the US, but globally.
Harold, I'm so grateful that you convene victims and survivors and you listen to their voices. You know, if there are people currently who are labor trafficking victims who are listening to this, there's a very clear message that I think we all want to send, and that is, you matter. The traffickers have been lying to you. They've been telling you that you're worthless. They've been telling you that your value is only linked to how productive you are. They're telling you that that the systems will work against you, that no one will want to help you, and that's just not true. Your traffickers are liars. They are people who are trying to exploit you. You know, in the United States, if an individual doesn't have legal status or immigration papers to be in the United States and they're a victim of trafficking, there are several different ways that the government can assist. If you go to law enforcement, if you come with an NGO to law enforcement, if you come on your own, there is a temporary continued presence immigration status that can be conferred to you that would allow you to work legally, to come out of the shadows and out of the clutches of the trafficker while the case is being worked. It's not a panacea. I won't lie to anyone. It's not winning the immigration lottery. It's the traffickers that try to exaggerate. What I want to communicate is there are pathways. They're not easy, but there are pathways out of trafficking, and they involve communication and transparency, the very things that traffickers avoid. So there's continued presence immigration status. There's also a self-petitioning T visa, T for trafficking. This is a visa that would allow a victim of trafficking to stay in the United States. Up to 5,000 can be issued a year, never gotten close to hitting that cap. There are T visas out there, and encourage people to apply for that immigration status, and encourage other countries to also build in systems to help non-citizen victims, people who are not lawfully there, because we know that one of the things that traffickers try to target is vulnerabilities. They want to exploit the vulnerable. And one of the most common vulnerabilities they want to exploit is someone who doesn't have immigration status. They want to threaten the victim with deportation. The reality, though, is that there are pathways around that. And we want to make sure that every single victim can find freedom and safety.
Thank you very much, Ambassador John Richmond. I think this means a lot to all the victims and survivors, not only in the US, but globally. But having said that, can you please share with my viewers today is that if somebody walks in, especially in the US, and if they come to a law enforcement agency, because when I was trying to fill these forms with everyone, they are so scared that they feel that they will get arrested. Do you think, do you look at from that? Do you look from that angle? If some victim comes to a law enforcement agency, will he first straight away get arrested? And if he is genuine, I'm talking about genuine, who has come, people have manipulated him, tricked him, and trapped him, are you going to arrest him and deport him?
Certainly not. Although I will tell you that my worry is that victims of trafficking are more likely to get arrested than the traffickers themselves. Oftentimes, traffickers encourage and force or compel victims to engage in unlawful conduct, and then use the fact that they've committed those acts as another means of coercion against them. Saying, we'll threaten to turn you into the police if you ever try to run, or if you don't comply and keep working. It's a tool of the traffickers. But what we want to make sure is that we make good on the promise of non-penalization of victims, that there is no victim that should ever be punished for the unlawful acts their trafficker forces them to engage in. But I'll be honest with you, Harold, I don't think the world is doing a good job at fulfilling that promise. We need to do better. We need to train law enforcement officers all over the world to make sure that they understand that they should never be arresting or prosecuting victims of trafficking, that they need to look beneath the surface, that they need to go into a process and a discussion to determine if the person actually had the intent to commit the crime or if they were coerced to do so. And so we want to make sure that no victim is ever penalized or punished. A couple ways to do that are to move through the system in a way that increases the likelihood that you're going to meet people that understand trafficking. For instance, contact the human trafficking hotline. Contact professionals within departments that understand this. Ask to speak to a detective or a police officer that's been trained in trafficking. Try to encourage communities to come alongside the police. Often the police, the constables in villages and neighborhoods around the world, they're living on the margins themselves. And I've seen this firsthand. We've seen studies from the World Bank that tell us that most police officers have never been trained in criminal investigations. They've been trained to do crowd control and fill out forms. They've been trained to wear their uniform properly, but they haven't been trained to actually find the truth, to seek justice. And what we want to make sure is that our criminal justice delivery systems are expanded and built up so that they can actually protect and serve, not just control and maintain the status quo.
Thank you very much, Ambassador John Richmond. That's pretty powerful for all my victims and survivors, not only in the US, but globally. But my viewers, I just want to say what Ambassador John Richmond said. It is from God's mouth. Like, they are not behind you, the immigrants, to get you arrested. If you're genuine, if you're scared, at least call the hotline number. I've saved this on my cell phone. So it's like 1-888, like 3-8, So when you call this number, is it safe, Ambassador John Richmond, for any victim in the US and he's into a case of, say, human trafficking or sex trafficking or any crime? So how safe is it? Because people are even scared to call this number when I tell them.
Yeah, the hotline is funded by the federal government. We want to make sure that anyone is free to call. It's not going to trigger an investigation. It could be anonymous if you want it to be. But obviously, to help a victim, more information has to be shared. And so you can begin a conversation with some of the trained hotline workers who service that hotline. Other countries are developing hotlines. You mentioned Mexico earlier. I know that they've been working on a hotline. Other countries as well. But I think the key is to find an advocate. And if you're on a hotline, contact an NGO, in your community, whether it's your church or temple. We're trying a way to help do is make sure that every individual is free to compete in the marketplace to find a job, and that they're not compelled to work against the rules.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador John Richmond. I just want going back. I have heard a lot about you when you were in India. Am I audible? Is it clear? Am I clear? Or there is a glitch?
I can hear you, Harold.
Okay, sorry. So I remember that you were in India with IGM. And what really touched me, I'll be very honest, I think, and I respect you by heart, and everyone respects you by heart. I read one article about you that, I don't know where it happened. I wanted to share, like, since you were in India, I wanted to share, like, what you were doing. You got a better glimpse of India. And I wanted to tell the community in India not to come here illegally. But I remember one episode that something happened and there's a mob that came and wanted to attack your team. But you came in the front as a leader, like a true leader, stood there. You say, you cannot touch any single of your team members. If you want to touch anyone, you have to knock me down first. You have to put me down. And that what I was like, wow, an American doing that in India. And what I wanted to share, the reason that Americans are good people. So it's not like here immigrants are told, oh, Americans are, and I always tell I was pitch black. Now with you, being with you, I've become brown, light brown. So you're good at heart. But I want you to share that you are so passionate, and you said, that I don't know what happened.
Harold, there were several incidents. I don't remember which article you read or what happened, but I will say I was so grateful to get to live in India. I've traveled a fair amount throughout the country, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Nagaland to Mumbai, and my family and I got to live in Chennai in Tamil Nadu. Lived there for a little over 3 years, and during that time, we were focused on forced labor cases. So we were looking into forced labor on agricultural lands, brick kilns, rice mills, rock quarries, the places where it typically occurs. I can tell you that that there were times when mobs formed, and I think that always happens whenever you're getting to the heart of something. We were doing enough cases and working with the Indian police, both IPS as well as local police, to try and think about how could we get the evidence forward and actually hold these business owners that were forcing people to work accountable. People call it bonded labor, but I worry that trivializes it. It's really just forced labor. They're just using a fictional debt. One brick kiln owner told me once, I asked him, we were doing an undercover operation. I had a surveillance video with me and a translator. And I asked him, what about these debts? Like, is it important? And he told me no. He actually used the word manungati in Tamil, basically saying that it's like a useless broken clay pot. It doesn't hold water anymore. What he was saying is that the debts are bait. that they're using these debts to hold people and make them feel like they cannot leave. And they have systems and powers behind them that allow that threat to feel more powerful than it really is. He never wanted to get his money back. He wanted to get the fruit of their labor for years, the fruit of labor of their children for decades. You know, as we began to see more cases, crowds did form, and there were several incidents where mobs formed, and we did stand there. But I can tell you, Harold, it wasn't me as the hero. It was all of the staff, all the people, Indian nationals who were investigators and social workers who were serving there. They were the ones standing up as well. I was there, and you know, I took a few punches, but I can tell you that that during each of those things, it was honestly, it wasn't, you know, me as a Westerner or from the United States coming in and doing well. It was Indian nationals standing up to a system they knew was wrong and trying to make sure the laws were going to be enforced. Because India has great laws. The question is not about having good laws on paper. Dr. Ambedkar made sure you had a great constitution in India. The challenge is making sure that those laws are actually enforced. And my worry is that the parchment promises that are printed in New Delhi don't reach the people they need to protect throughout rural India.
I think Ambassador John Richmond, you have in-depth knowledge, and I think you educated me about India, like what you said. So that's pretty good. And having said that, I know there are some delegates from Bollywood watching this today. And why I say that they're trying to come out with a film, a biopic on me. And it just struck to me like talking to you, and it will take time. I think the film will get released in maybe 2022. But I would like you to be a part of that. Maybe it'll be next year. And would you be a part in the film, because it will be watched by millions of people, and it's not to give education, empowerment, not only in India, but globally. Like what you're saying, you're talking today makes a huge difference for every community members all over the world. Because when you talk, like US is the most powerful country in the world, and that's how people look at it. So would you take part in this film in a positive way and to share something personally?
Harold, I think the real question is, what handsome actor is going to portray you in the film?
Oh, that's a good question. They are like, I don't know whether I'm eligible to speak right now before, but they give me very good names, which are very famous. You know, they're all like good actors. I don't know about
Harold, regardless of who plays you, I am thrilled that that your story is going to be memorialized in film and able for millions to be able to see around the world and raise awareness about this issue, but also honor what you and your family have not only endured, but also how you have lived as a survivor and made your voice heard. You have not hidden in the shadows. You've been willing to stand up for what is right. You've been willing to offer criticism to governments when they need to do better. And we're grateful for that in the United States. But you've also been an advocate for change. You've been willing to stand up and highlight the idea that that coming legally to a country is the right way to do it. Coming illegally is going to make you vulnerable to traffickers in any country, whether you're moving to take a job as a domestic worker in the Gulf, or you're coming to the United States, or you're trying to move to Malaysia to work in a factory. Illegal migration puts you at great risk, and I appreciate you elevating that.
No, thank you very much, Ambassador John Richmond. I just want to tell my viewers, my friends in India, globally, that Ambassador John Richmond is a very good, I always consider him as a fatherly figure, and not in words, in deeds. I have all your stuff here. You like send me signed, and yes, you'll not believe, friends, that can you imagine? I don't know how you do it, sir. You're so busy, Ambassador John Richmond, but you still send me personal greetings from DC, and you send me gifts, and that is what touches the heart of a survivor, and that is what you do. I just want to share, friends, that because we are running short of time, that Ambassador John Richmond, I just want you to tell the audience, like, you know the pulse, you know the pain, and you know the power. Like I always say, about you know the 7 P's, of human trafficking. Like we say, prevention, protection, prosecution, partnership, pain, pulse, and power. So you know the pulse of the victims, survivors, any of the perpetrators. And I know that you interacted with a lot of perpetrators. You prosecuted a lot of them. So could you share something like how, you really do it in a very passionate way?
Harold, one of the things I'm incredibly grateful for that most people might be surprised by is the opportunity to spend time with traffickers. And I've learned a lot from scholars. I've learned a lot from survivors. But I've also learned some things from conversations with traffickers themselves. There are a couple things that come to mind in terms of what they've taught me. One is what motivates them. Every trafficker is motivated by money. They want to maximize their profits. They might also be hateful people. They may be bigoted. They may have mixed motives, but the primary motivation is always economic. And that changes the way we think about human trafficking. I think when I grew up and reading about historic slavery, it always seemed that it was motivated by menacing, mean people who hated other people because of their race or where they were from. But the reality is that trafficking has always been motivated by money, and people have exploited other people in order to maximize illicit profits. Understanding that motivation allows us to think about this crime in a different way, allows us to, in a sense, follow the money. It allows us to understand the business model that traffickers are employing. It allows us to understand that they are vulnerable to risk because they're more rationally acted or motivated actors within the space. So they've taught me their motivation. They've also taught me that they'll use whatever means of coercion necessary and no more. They want to use the least amount of coercion to compel people to act. And one of the big ideas, I think, is that trafficking doesn't require beatings, shackles, cages, and chains. Oftentimes it's a threat. It's telling someone who loves their little sister that if you don't make your quota, I'm going to enforce your little sister into this brothel and she's going to do it for you. And now, motivated out of fear and love for their sister, they will endure unbelievable pain. But there's not a mark on them. There's not a locked door. There's not a cage or a chain. And people who are looking for bruises as indicia of slavery in this modern era are not often going to find them. The other times they'll use debts, like we were talking about under the bonded labor system, where debt is a coercive means. Some use addictions to coerce. Others use threats to third parties, reputational harm, religious abuse, other sorts of things to force people to engage in commerce that they don't want to be in. And so we want to stand against that. Traffickers have also shared with me who they want to target. They want to target people they think are weak, even if those people actually aren't weak. They want to target the vulnerable. So people with disabilities, people without education, people of a lower caste, people who may not have access to communities of support. Each of these groups, each of these, what I think your report last year, Harold, called it underserved populations. Each of these groups of people, they want to target them, but they target an individual within those populations. And I think that we always want to make sure that we remember that this is a crime that's always about people. People commit it, and people are victimized by it, and communities suffer the entire pain. So I'm grateful for the time I've gotten to spend with traffickers. It's helped me get a window into how they view their crime so that we can better work to stop them.
This is very fantastic, Ambassador John Richmond, like what you said about the perpetrators or traffickers. And I just want to tell my friends, Mara Mitro, I'm going to say in my language that like what Ambassador John Richmond has said is very true. So always think before coming to the United States of America, do not come illegally. I say it's hell, but if you come legally, it is heaven. And always call the hotline number. And I just want to appreciate, respect on behalf of all the Indian community back. They were very excited to see you today and listen to you, and they all love you. And I'm just saying it on their behalf, not only from India, but there are delegates from Pakistan, Nepal, UK, and all the panelists. And I would request Hriday Rawal from India. They have a small token of love for you, sir, which they want to give it to you today. So it's on behalf of all our friends in India and globally in the US, the immigrants and survivors, for all the good work you are doing. And we are praying for you that you help all the victims and survivors and you remain strong and hale and healthy and happy. So Hriday Rawal and Manan, can you like get Hriday on the screen, or please?
Hello. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes.
Namaste, John Richmond, sir. We are very proud and thankful that you have taken your valuable time and share your thoughts on the heinous crimes of human trafficking. On behalf of Eyes Open International family, we would like to honor you with this memento so that you will be remembered this day as human trafficking, the Untold, organized by Eyes Open International. Sorry, I have power cut here. So I am managing with the study lamp. So I don't have electricity, and it will be for sharing your valuable time with us.
Thank you very much. I'm so grateful. And it's been great to be with you today. I hope that these conversations continue. I'm grateful for all the good work that you're doing.
No, I really
Thank you,
thank you. And I don't know, I know you are very tight on time. At every second means a lot to me. But Dr. Gopal, who is in Chicago, the president of SAFE CHR, she does a lot of work in India. She wanted to just talk to you for a second, or she had a question. Is that okay with you or no?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so she wanted to just, yeah, Dr. Gopal, if you can get online for a minute.
I'm online. I wasn't sure what question, but it's an honor to serve with you on this panel, Ambassador. Thank you so much for being such a major support for Herald and all the Indian community and all the survivors around the world. You're truly a beacon of hope for all of us who work in the field. We are boots on the ground people. We work directly with patients. I've seen about 14 survivors just in the past month. And yet in Indiana, we have only 159 reported cases. The challenge is huge because survivors, as you know, do not identify as survivors. So how do we actually get this training to our law enforcement? Because they're the first responders. Our hospital ER is another first responder. As you know, 85% of the cases come to the ER before they go anywhere else. So how do we institute, with the Blue Campaign, with other federal resources, as well as NGOs in the country, how do we combine forces so we have like a national collaborative that works together? Because the UN has a collaborative, I'm part of that, but that doesn't affect us here in the States. So how do we have a national collaborative that we can form along with survivors and their panels, and the NGOs are working really hard to come together? And I'm thinking perhaps on a quarterly basis, but is that possible? Is there something you already had in mind that's already been instituted? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are a number of different training initiatives throughout the United States on local, state, or federal levels. And there are several collaborations that have been occurring that currently exist, but they can always be improved and we can have more. I think the key is making sure that we get that information, not just as a checkbox training, something that you could tick off at the beginning of a meeting, but actually get into the meat of the material. Having something like that would allow folks to understand how to identify victims. We do want to see more victims identified. And NGOs can be a huge partner in that. Law enforcement and making sure they know. You mentioned hospitals. We know so many victims of trafficking actually receive medical care during the time that they are trafficked, and they could be identified in those hospitals. We know that schools can identify folks, neighbors can. We want more and more people to understand this, not in the sense of stranger danger, where we make everyone afraid that there are these menacing traffickers out there. Most of the people being trafficked are being trafficked by people they know, people that they have become friends with, or honestly, family members. We want to make sure that we raise awareness about how slavery and modern slavery actually look, not the commercialized movie sort of image of it, but instead what's actually happening. And as we improve our training, I think we'll improve our identification. And look forward to lots of collaborative efforts. Perhaps there could be some that you lead, and organizations that are formed as we go forward.
Absolutely. I think as a clinician and one of the few psychologists who works in the field, one of the major challenges I have is that victims don't identify as victims. They just don't. You know, if you tell them, for example, the youngest child I've seen is 7 months old, who was trafficked by a mother with cognitive challenges. And this was for her boyfriend, who she met on the internet. And she was offering her child in exchange for friendship and so-called love, as you know. So that was the youngest case. So we have all these cases I see, and yet none of them have actually identified as victims of trafficking. Not one person will say, well, you know, I was trafficked when I was 8 years old. It just doesn't happen. They're not in chains, as people think. They're not branded. They're basically just regular folks like you and I who have come from adverse childhood circumstances. And so I think one of the biggest challenges I think we have, what I would request of you, because like Carol said, I mean, the kind of power you have on the national and international stage and the sort of presence you have and the goodness of heart, if we could create within this country itself, within the United States, a collaborative that's national and where people meet and exchange ideas and actually form a cohesive unit.
Mm-hmm.
So that we have tremendous, they are fabulous trainings. Everybody does wonderful training, but there's just a dispersion of funds along that if we could all unite and create a one collaborative, a unified collaborative, I think, and this is my suggestion, and it may be completely off the wall, but I tend to think off the wall anyway. So, so if we could do something like that, I think it would be a huge help to our survivors, knowing that they have the backing of an entire nation.
Absolutely. No, collaborating in that regard would be incredible. Harold?
Thank you, Ambassador John Richmond. I really appreciate all your time, and we overshot by 10 minutes. I apologize for that.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with the rest of the conversations today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tegan. Thank you. Yeah, Mayank, Chaya. Ambassador John Richmond had to step out at 9:30, but I think I wanted everyone to participate, like Dr. Kerry and Dr. PM Nair, but I'm so sorry. But Mayank, Chaya, I think we will start now with the open conversation with Dr. PM Nair, Dr. Kerry, and Dr. Gopal.
So, I wonder if straight off the bat, Harold, I could just say, and I would have said it to Ambassador John Richmond had he had more time for this, is that, with the Palermo Protocol, what you were looking at there was the whole interaction with the criminal part of the process of intervention with the traffickers. And of course, as survivors, looking at the whole sort of survival program and recovery and reintegration. But from our centre at Cambridge, where we look at human trafficking in the round and in the Palermo Protocol round, which is looking at prevention, very particularly as one of the strands, is that, that brings us into looking at just who are these vulnerable populations who are preyed upon for human trafficking. Well, of course, it isn't just one homogenous group right at the bottom of society, but actually that does make up a huge swathe of those who are trafficked and enslaved in contemporary society, because what they're trying to do is get out of poverty. And this year, what we've been looking at in our annual symposium is looking at the role of the Sustainable Development Goals in looking at that. Now, I know that some of our audience here today will be very up to speed with what the Sustainable Development Goals are, but they were only brought into play in 2015, and many people, and including those who worked desperately hard to address the terrible human rights violation, which is human trafficking. I mean, it is just a considerable obliteration of attention to people's dignity and respect as equal members of this society that we live in for a short while on this glorious planet called Earth. The majority of people who get trafficked and get enslaved, the first reason why that has happened is because of impoverishment, number one. Number two, because of inequality. Number three, because of lack of access to education. Number four, lack of opportunity to access decent work. Now, I could keep going because there are about 7 major areas that we see in at the centre, and we'll be publishing on and putting little videos out about, that these are major structural challenges. They're not just a matter of just some individuals being a little bit more chaotically available for being trafficked. These are big political, economic, geopolitical, structural issues. And it seems to me that we have to have that as part of the debate, have to have that as part of the response from our national and international leaders. So they acknowledge, actually, we're a bit out of kilter here, guys. You know, it's not just a matter of some haphazard individuals being exploited by some very wicked traffickers. And then, you know, we just have to go after the traffickers. No, no, no. We've got a whole sort of basket of challenge around impoverishment and systems that are not protecting their communities. And the second point, and then I'll let PM come in, because I think it's very important PM pops across on this, which is, you know, we seem to miss out those who are happy to exploit those who are being exploited, because, you know, there wouldn't be a business model. There'd be no business model for the traffickers if there weren't people who were consuming these goods, were goods rather than people consuming, in terms of domestic servitude, in terms of sex trafficking, in terms of forced marriages, in terms of child labor, in terms of all sorts of arenas of bonded labor. And this is, I mean, this is massive. When you start talking like that, this is massive. This actually goes way beyond 45 million people, in my view, or the 21 million that the United Nations organizations for drugs and crime look at. We are talking about a sizable percentage of the global population who get caught. And with COVID times, we're talking about another, what, 70 million people being pushed into what's called extreme poverty, and they're being called the new poor, the new poor. And that is something that we have to address in this conversation, in my view. Thank you. PM, are you wanting to talk?
Yeah.
Yes, PM, yes, please.
Can I? Okay. I fully endorse what Professor Kari said. I'm very grateful to the first of all, I'm grateful to Mr. Harold and the team for asking me to come in and to listen to the dialogue. It's a wonderful audience. I appreciate the initiative of the Eyes Open International and the media too. Thank you so much. It's hardly spoken in the media. I salute the media for taking this forward. Very important. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You have opened up a new vista. Let's take it forward. Well, Ambassador spoke about the vulnerability factors, and he spoke about the traffickers. Fair enough. But the whole issue of trafficking boils down to an issue of demand. Issue of demand. The customers, if there is sexual exploitation, who are these customers? There may be one fellow getting the girls from Nepal to Delhi. That fellow is a trafficker. Fair enough. Convict him, hang him, finish him. But who are the men who violate these women's rights? Hundreds and hundreds of girls from Jharkhand, Ranchi to Delhi. 5,000 girls on domestic labor. And 98% of the 89% of them are sex slaves. Who are these customers? They may be a white collar people with a tie and coat, and you call them as a great human beings? There lies the whole issue, the issue of demand. I think we need to address the issue of demand in a more concerted manner across the globe. Probably, I think for me as a researcher, not as a police officer, as a researcher, I find human trafficking is demand driven. Human trafficking is demand driven. Unless we focus on demand, by just sheer focus on vulnerability, we will not be able to take action, deal with the issue properly. Number one. Number two, a lot of illicit assets, illicit money being generated. I don't hear of any confiscation where in India or in even US, you have the reports say about conviction. That's fair enough. But what about the illegal assets? Those illegal assets have to be confiscated. that should go to the government or to go to the victim. I think that's very important. That's not being done. Third most important, the responders, the NGOs, the police, the prosecutors, the judiciary, are they skilled? They may know the law, but are they skilled? Professor Gopal speaks about psychological counseling and training. How many people, police, prosecutors, judiciary, academics, NGOs, know how to talk to a victim? Mr. Harold, you are a different category of a victim. I'm sorry if I'm using the word victim, but there are many who can't speak, who will not speak. You know, even the Wordsworth says our communication is 35% is spoken and 65% is not spoken. Here is a victim who has been raped multitude of times, or a slave of bonded labor, of a forced labor for months and months and years. Will that child, will that man, will that woman ever speak? No. Who will speak for them? So now there is a need for an intricate involvement of persons like Dr. Gopal and others to come in to train and skill the judiciary first. Then comes the police, then comes the prosecutor, then comes the doctor, then comes the caregiver, then comes the NGO. NGOs rescue. You go to any NGO in India, websites show so many rescued. How many of them have been psychologically trained to deal with the victim, to talk to the victim? I think it's far and few. So there lies a major issue. One more important aspect is, Professor Kari did speak about the Millennium MDG and the developmental goals. When I did a study for the World Bank, I find the fault lies not, you just can't say it's a policing job. You take all our duty holders, all our stakeholders and duty holders in the process. International funding agencies come and invest huge money. They make roads and roads, fair enough. But what happens to the population on the other side? Because if the connectivity is developed, you say, pat your shoulders, I've done a great job, I've done so much road. Fair enough. Where is the population? The population is poor people, the tribals, the scheduled castes, the weaker sections are being dragged into the malls and business establishments there. And what rightly Professor Kari said, are they aware of their rights? Education is missing, their awareness is missing. Even if they are aware, access to rights is missing. Even if access to rights is there, access to justice is missing. You know, it's a vicious cycle. So therefore, even when a development takes place, development is not the panacea unless the development is people-centric, unless the development is community-centric. We think only of the corridor development. It should be community development. Then let the corridors come after the community, or let the community and corridors work together. Unless that happens, we cannot take it forward. Last but not the least is very important about prevention. All of us speak about prosecution. We prosecuted so many, convicted so many, we did this and that, and rescued so many. But why should we rescue at all? Still start about prevention. When the more you prevent, the more crimes are. We don't have to speak about that. Since my media friend is on the media and watching us in Meghalaya, a small state in India, media asked me maybe 10 years back, Mr. Nair, you speak so eloquently about human trafficking. You are so committed. You have worked 40 years on this business. Tell me, why are you wasting your time? Because we have no crime here. You know what I did? Can I request the media, gentlemen and ladies here, please print in your media, if your child is working in Goa or Mumbai or Delhi, please believe the child, but the child may have been trafficked. There must be something wrong with the child. Can we look into that? Give the details to us. We form a small committee of NGO and police there and academics there, three-member team. I said, please share the information. We'll keep it confidential. We'll find out where the child is. Can you believe for 10 years in Meghalaya, the crime was zero. And when we started the mission, in 1 year's time, 176 crimes came up. All the children were working somewhere, but they were all sex slaves. Now the point is, how do we get that? The media has got a tremendous role. So that opened up a new issue as to how the media can come in prevention. Unless you work with the media, unless you work with the community, we cannot take it forward. That's why we started an interesting mission called Anti-Human Trafficking Clubs in the Colleges. Club. You have a fancy club, you have dramatics club, you have this club and that club. We started anti-human trafficking clubs in the colleges. Now, so many colleges in India having these clubs. youth is empowered. We tell them what small, simple matters, the indicators of trafficking, how this can lead to trafficking. Not trafficking per se, how this can lead to trafficking. And when the students start working, I think a magnificent work, tremendous impact in prevention. Second, Panchayat against human trafficking. You know, yeah, India has got a local institution called Panchayat, very important institution. Nobody ever thought of investing on Panchayat. We started, in fact, I started last year under identifying Panchayats and telling the Panchayats, this is trafficking. Your girl missing is not just missing. She has not run away from somewhere. She has been taken away by somebody. The child missing is not the child is missing. Child has been taken away by somebody. So empower the Panchayats and do on prevention. If we can work on prevention, I think our job is done. Thank you so much.
Dr. Nair, it's so amazing that I think you have given a very deep insight and nobody has thought about it. I know there are so many people watching right now from India. I don't want to take names. I know there is one lady, Mamta, from India, and there are people gone through and they told me like they've gone through and then parents don't believe them. You know, like girls and also, which is very true. Like, you know, we as parents or adults need to believe people and respect them and take actions. So I know Mayank is not there, but Dr. Gopal, you'd like to say something to what PM Nair, and I think PM Nair, we should collaborate with Eyes Open International. I'm pretty excited with you. And thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, we should have, it's not only Indian problem. What I spoke is exactly true in Nepal, exactly true in Bangladesh, exactly true in Myanmar, exactly true in Sri Lanka, all countries. How many children are reported missing in India? And can you believe every year, 40,000 children remain untraced in India, 20,000 in Nepal, 20,000 in Bangladesh. Where are they? Where are these children? They have not just burned away. They are not just flying away. They are all there in some massage parlor or some brick-in or some slaughterhouse, somewhere there. I wish the media spoke about that. Raise this point. Unless we make public aware, we will not be able to attend. So we need to have an international cooperation too. I am sure ICE International can take it forward as an international mission. Sorry, Dr. Gopal, I intervened in between.
No, I just hand it over to Mayank and then he'll take from there.
No, I was just paying attention to what was being said. That's my job as a journalist. A couple of points jumped out at me. But before I mention those, I would like to point out that I was perhaps among the very first journalists who walked with Kailash Satyarthi. This is about almost 30 years ago, when he was rescuing children in bonded labor from places like Firozabad. I have tracked this for a very long time. I have fairly good understanding of what goes on, but the couple of things that jumped out that I mentioned was one from Dr. Ford, who spoke in terms of impoverishment, which goes to the very heart of what we are witnessing now. And with the pandemic raging, impoverishment is going to increase. There is just no denying that. How do you deal with what is coming, which will add to trafficking in a very significant way? That's Dr. Ford's part. And the part that I wanted to address with Dr. Nair, he spoke about demand, which is a pathetic commentary on the moral benchmarks that humanity has. If there is a demand for the kind of thing that we have demand for, is it not a manifestation of what the lower standards of morality that the human race has fallen to? Maybe Dr. Ford can start with impoverishment aspect.
Sure, thank you. Well, I just think that, you know, as we're looking at this, the new poor, which are emerging already now, and that's just on figures looking at that the pandemic would run through 2020. It's now looking more than likely that the pandemic will be working its way through in 2021 too. So that we're talking a very big tranche of people who now are in positions of extreme poverty, who will be in extreme poverty and absolutely available for this form of debt bondage, impoverishment, and enslavement and human trafficking. How do we approach it? How do we address it? Well, one of the things is that every country, I think, should be mandated by the UN inside the G7, inside the G20 when it meets, to say, what is your approach going to be for a more structured intervention around social protection. Now, that is going to be hard figures. You know, it's money. It's money on the table to move it from the status quo to saying, actually, we see, rather like climate change, we see that we have to act differently. We cannot just let the economy run in this neoliberal framework free from an approach that goes, we have to be more social attention, attentive with our policies, because unless we do that, what we're going to have is a depth of, well, I would say sort of endemic criminalization and dehumanization in terms of the way we relate to one another geopolitically and in terms of our national politics. That is a matter of political discussion, as well as, this is what I'm wanting to say and what the Centre has been saying for the last 3 years, we have got to move this conversation about trafficking out of a single lens of being a policing activity or being a border policing activity. Yes, of course, those are dimensions of bringing some control into chaos. But actually, in terms of squeezing down on the lake of those who are going to be exploited in this way, is a major political and international political activity and action. And we have to take it seriously. You can't go into denial around what needs to happen in terms of a political revolution around how we view who are parts of our society and who are not, who are worthy of having full educational rights and who are not. Who are the people that were prepared to just go, oh, okay, these are the hill tribes, we care not, or these are the lower caste, we care not, or these are just young women, young females who anyway would probably end up as some sort of prostitutes anyway. This is no way for us to be operating in the 21st century. It's not a language that we should allow ourselves to inhabit, but we need to talk about it. We need to have this as, one of the top 3 areas for discussion around our political tables, and frequently it isn't. Human trafficking ends up indeed around in our security conversations at the UN Security Council, not in terms of how are people being dealt with and how do we seek to deal with one another as pro-social human beings. It's discussed in terms of how do we stop terrorism, because trafficking could be part of the whole terrorist thing.
Right.
It's like we don't look at both the numbers and the endemic disqualification. It's like a disqualification of being able to live with full human rights, full human dignity, full respect. If we had that more of the conversation on the media, in our political debates, and indeed saying to business is not just about making more money for your business than that bottom line. The bottom line actually is to flourish as a whole community. We stand or fall by the way that we care for one another, that we pay attention to one another, and we take our responsibilities, whatever we're doing, wherever we are set within society for one another. It needs to be a new bottom line of discourse between us. So we're talking about really ingesting deeply what the Sustainable Development Goals are going on about, and I don't hear it.
Right. Dr. Nair, I hope you heard what I said about the points that you were making in terms of demand. What does it say of a society that has a demand like this? I mean, can we fall any lower morally?
Well, sir, when you speak about demand, more than the morality part, I appreciate what you had a point you're trying to raise, but I would put it in the human rights perspective. If my daughter is not for sale, how is your daughter for sale? If my child is not for sale, how is your child for sale? So let's think from the rights perspective. Since we change the whole discourse into morality side, things have not taken the right shape. So I would put it from the rights perspective. And when you have a rights education from the starting with the school education, I think things will change. So we need to get the entire dialogue, entire narrative from a rights perspective, and then things can be better. And also to add one line that you mentioned you have been working with Kalyani, and I'm sure we would have crossed each other because 1982, I rescued 133 children when I was young superintendent police of a district where Kalyani came, and he started his mission of Bachpan Bachao Andolan from there, way back in 82. I'm sure we would have met somewhere.
Yeah.
So the issue of morality is very important, but the question of rights is the prime factor.
Yeah, I'll conclude that part with you and then move on to the other panelists. In terms of rights, I used to report out of Bombay's red light district in the 80s. And when you talk of human rights, I happened to speak to a lot of the women working there, and a lot of them had children because of their activities. And they talked in terms of their rights. Now, that conversation did not go anywhere because I don't think in societies like India and many other societies, rights even work at that level. So how do you address that? It's a very complicated subject. Rights across the board is hard to understand for people.
I suppose it's not difficult. When we started the anti-human trafficking clubs, this is exactly what we told the children. Whatever rights you have, give that much right to others. If we can instill that feeling of rights into youth, into the young minds, I think we can make a difference. We have not tried that. From my experiment of anti-human trafficking clubs, this is exactly what I did. I never spoke about international conventions and protocols. We just spoke about basic rights. And this could make a tremendous impact. That's it.
Dr. Gopal, I had a quick question for you. Have you personally looked at, as a professional, the deep impact that this kind of trauma makes on generations of people who grow up in a situation like that?
Oh, absolutely. But before I address that issue, I want to address something that Dr. Nair said about the psychological aspects and prevention. I grew up in the army in India, right? So I'm army brat, and I've been all over India. But I can tell you one thing. Indians have a very fundamental sense of right and wrong, very fundamental. And we also have this concept of how boys are grown and how boys are raised and how girls are raised, right? There's a very different thing. You send a boy out to school, but you'll keep the girl at home. It's a fundamental village concept that we have in India. And India is majority villages. So when you go to the Pahadi area, for example, the mountain area, say Assam, Aijal, those areas, you find the women are the ones who do all the work, whereas the men are sitting ghar mein and doing hookah, they're smoking the hookah or whatever else. So there's a very different way from one part of India to another part. So we really can't generalize India as one country. Even though we speak of it as one country, it's multiple countries within a subcontinent. And that's why I guess we call it a subcontinent. Then I was in Delhi, back, and I was and this is a jail in New Delhi, India. And I was collecting data there. And one of the interesting things I found, and unfortunately very alarming things I found, was that these girls were being taken and servicing local or international dignitaries. So what's happening across the globe, and by the way, this happens in the United States too. It's not localized to India. It happens in juvenile detention centers in the States where older children are recruiting younger children. They in fact get themselves into the jail population, into the juvenile detention population so that they can recruit other children. So I wanted to share that aspect of it and to address Dr. Nair's rights. If we raise our boys from a very young age, and that becomes each of our responsibilities, if we raise our boys from a very young age, that girl in your class has the same rights as you do. She's as much as a person as you are. And if we raise our boys across the globe, and this is not just about India, this is around the world. if we raise our boys to respect a girl, you are raising a healthier human being. So it comes to prevention because there's always demand. But where's the demand stemming from? It's a psychological aspect of power. I am a boy, I'm a man, therefore I have the power to do XYZ to you who are my secretary or who are a woman in bondage to me. Why is it that a majority of women who were trafficked, 100% by the way, based on a study, 100% of women who are trafficked become traffickers themselves because they're identifying psychologically with the power differential of a male-female. And that power differential is what makes them traffickers in the end. Okay, but the boys, not all the boys who are trafficked become traffickers. They commit suicide. They go into crimes of substance abuse. They go into crimes of incarceration where they get incarcerated because of murder and other criminal activities. So when you look at traffickers, you're looking at the difference between those who are trafficked that are male, those who are trafficked that are female, and therein lies the psychological components of upbringing, which Dr. Nair was trying to talk to you about this, because that is really the fundamental difference between male-female power differential. And that differential is what we need to address, because unless we address that, we are not addressing demand.
I think I just want to pop in just a note of caution here. I'm all for rights, PM, absolutely. However, I do think we need to talk about common dignity because there's something about talking about dignity and respect that puts us into the community, back into the community where we absolutely belong. I think if COVID has taught us anything, in the North anyway, in the Northern Hemisphere, in the West, is that, you know, this whole philosophy of individualism, you know, really falls over when we're allowed to just be individuals detached from society. It reminds us that we are interconnected. We are pro-social. Now we need to work on that pro-sociality and say, actually, that is about allowing and giving everybody dignity. Because if we allowed that, then our quality of life could be, you know, shared with others. And maybe that means that some parts of the globe or some parts of the caste system or some parts of the class system, some parts of the racially divided systems we have and we have lived with, we've just agreed with it. We've thought, right, this is just how it is, you know, can continue. No, it can't. And trafficking is one of the nasty, nasty, vicious illnesses like the pandemic that is there as a pandemic in our society, and we need to address it.
Absolutely, I fully endorse.
Before I think I'm going to sign off in a little bit. I have to jump into another interview, but on the extreme right frame, I see a lady who haven't been introduced to, Mr. D'Souza, who is that a panelist that we haven't addressed yet?
I think you're talking about Anne Victory. Are you, Nair?
I think so. I'm not too sure. I didn't want to be rude to her that she's not in the conversation. That's why I was trying to get a clarification, but I don't hear it nevertheless. So there are a couple of questions that I have received that I would like to pass on. Let me see. I'm just reading it, so please bear with me. This one is for Dr. Nair. The question is, what kind of difficulties or challenges does India face when it comes to significantly eradicating human trafficking?
Oh, issues are plenty. First and foremost, I would put it as a political recognition of the issue of human trafficking. Number two would be the distortions in the law enforcement. And third is in the very understanding itself, as Professor Kari said, the whole thing cannot be seen from a police eye or a crime perspective. We need to understand from the larger perspective. I spoke about the World Bank corridor approach and versus community approach. That's exactly what it is. And then another important thing we have in my research, I did a national list in 2005, and that showed the entire law enforcement was distorted. The victims were being persecuted and prosecuted. Things have changed a lot now, but not to the desired level. And most importantly, the whole issue of law enforcement itself is a challenge, because much of the crimes are not registered, not investigated. So the law enforcement itself is a major challenge. And last but not the least, the whole issue of prevention. I mentioned about the issue of prevention, because for any crime normally registered, recorded, if one crime is recorded, there may be 100 crimes prevented. But in this case of human trafficking, it's not so. It's not so. The tip of the iceberg is being registered. We have seen there during the COVID scenario, so much of violations have taken place, but how many issues have been taken note of? It's the whole issue of prevention is still a myth, I would say. We need to focus much on human trafficking, the prevention of human trafficking. Last but not the least, now it has come into online exploitation. Earlier it was offline. Now it is much more into online exploitation. People are illiterate in computers, but they all got computers now. So online traffickers are having a prowl, and therefore we need to address the issue of online exploitation from a different perspective, which has not been taken so far. So that is another important issue which we need to. And lastly, when you think of law enforcement, it is not just trafficking per se. Missing children, missing persons, so many issues are networked. We have not recognized the importance of those issues. Therefore, we see from one perspective or from one lens, and therefore we miss the other dimensions. That's a major issue today.
Before I sign off, I have just last 2 points that, again, I'm reading from the questions that I have received. One is once again for Dr. Nair. The other one is for Mr. D'Souza. For Mr. Nair, quickly, it seems more like a request than a question. It says there are people who are planning to start a sort of a national human trafficking hotline number in India, and they are going to call it Bharat Manav Taskari Seva. Would you be in a position to help them in any way in terms of connecting them to the right people and resources?
We can do that, but don't call it Taskari. Taskari translation means smuggling.
That's what I thought.
A lot of difference between smuggling and trafficking. So we should call it Manav Vyapa. It is the selling of human beings.
Right.
So it's a lot of difference between smuggling and trafficking.
Right.
So that's one part. Second is, if you want to have a national network, I don't think it's any difficulty. Today you have a child line, which you may be aware, 1098, started 20 years back as by an NGO in Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Today, it's an important helpline in the whole country. The government has recognized that. I think it's a really good idea to do that. We can try and link up with, starting with NGOs, then semi-government agencies, and then we can link up with the government agencies. It's a good idea to do that.
Okay. And this one is for Mr. D'Souza. It's a slightly broad question. One is, in the next couple of years, how do you see EOI evolving? And given the current climate of scoffing at people who migrate legally or illegally, how do you think EOI can play a role there?
I think that's a very good question. I think for me or for EOI, I don't say about me. I said the EOI is for all the community members. It's not my organization. It's our organization. And like with delegates like Dr. Gopal, Dr. Nair, and Dr. Kalyani, including you, Mayank, Chaya, is that I'm looking out to open 50 branches by December of next year in different countries. And most of the people, like when I open a branch in any country, I would like to prefer to open who's a local or maybe who's going to stay there and knows what's going on. And most important, I don't believe in age, caste, color, creed, nationality. So if a person has got passion and wants to do something, I encourage them. And my other focus is that friends, viewers, and Mayank Bhai, is that whenever I appoint somebody, I would prefer to appoint who is already a victim or a survivor, because he or she can understand. That's number one. And number two, he or she gets empowered. And she or she can, even when somebody calls, a victim calls, a survivor calls, can understand. So I don't want to get deep into the things, but my entire team, like who's like volunteering or working for Eyes Open International, have gone through that phase in life. But I do not want to make it public or announce it for whatever reason, maybe for embarrassment, or maybe whenever that he or she is ready and can talk, then, but I don't want to give that space to that each individual who is working for Eyes Open International. But I'm getting very good response. We have like over 200 volunteers globally. I have Bilal Ahmed from Pakistan. I have Sena Dakal from Nepal. You know, we have like Mamta, we have Hriday Rawal, we have like Rakesh, Sonal, everybody from different countries. And even from the White House, like people support me a lot. So that means a lot to me. So we have a different forum, like a law enforcement agencies. And I always tell two things, that, you know, I'm a postman and I do not charge any money. So I'm working with a lot of victims. Like I said, I'm working on this expungement of law where we get them connected. So I basically get them connected with the delegates. So I'm like a postman. So I don't do anything. It's the law enforcement agencies or the immigration departments or delegates like PM Nair, like he has rescued so many people. So if I have connection, I'll get them connected. So I don't do it for money. And then people are really touched. And that is what has motivated me, because in my own life, Mayank Bhai and friends, that individuals have helped me without knowing my background. So I cannot forget that. Today, it is not about me. Today, both my sons are free, my wife and myself. So, you know, it is, you don't know what I've gone through. I never dreamt that I would be out, you know. So that's a huge difference. Thank you.
I mean, I would sign off now, but before that, I would like to acknowledge a couple of things. One is, of course, the fact that Bharat Media has jumped into a serious conversation like that and devoted so much time in streaming and broadcasting live. My background has been hard news, print media for a long time. I'm as mainstream as you get, but these are the subjects that I've addressed for a long time. So we are very glad that we are able to provide that platform. And I would particularly like to acknowledge the remarkable help given by Manan Rawal, who happens to be the founder of Bharat Media. He's sitting right next to me. He's not given to making himself too visible. So I think all of us need to applaud his effort here as well. I'm going to sign off because, as I said, I have an interview to do. So thank you all, and I applaud the remarkable work that you do. Thank you, Mr. D'Souza, for bringing me in, and hopefully we'll continue the conversation. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayank, Chaya. And having said that, we'll continue. I just want Fiona Dixon, who's in Canada. She's the regional director for Canada. And I wanted to share some few words and with our viewers. So Fiona Dixon, can you come in? And then I would like Hriday Rawal from India and Vyasi Gandhi from US to say a few words about your experience, about your expertise. And then we have Emil Barr, who's, I always say age is just a number. Emil Barr, I think he joined me at the age of 15, you know, as a vice president communication. And he has developed the entire website. And today he's just 17 years old. And I think just joined college. So I always encourage students or kids or any vulnerable population across the world that if you're into unemployment, if you're into human trafficking, you're a victim, you know, or if you're going through depression, every problem has a solution. You can come out, you can turn obstacles into opportunities. So is anybody joining? Hriday or Fiona? I don't know. I think they were on the line. So can you get on the video or others? Yes, yeah.
Hello.
Yes, we can't see you. We can't see you.
Hello,
Okay,
sir.
Now?
Yes.
So namaste everyone. I'm regional director for Eyes Open International India. So in India, basically we are into partnership with many NGOs. Some of them are having their rescue missions going on. So if anyone calls me that yes, I am suffering from this, my trafficker is harassing me, so we coordinate with the local police or that NGO so that they conduct the rescue operation, do investigation and save them. There are many rescue houses over here. So we coordinate with those NGOs who are into the shelter home places. So after that, we take the victims to the shelter home and we take care of them till 5 years. We make sure that the victims are not re-victimized again. And also we're into process of publishing Eyes Open International so that people can get empowered, people can get to know what human trafficking is actually is. So the main face of Eyes Open International is Harold D'Souza. So right now I'm getting calls that yes, my friend or family is being stuck in USA. Can you help me? But gradually we are partnering with all of these NGOs, and we are making a noise in India that yes, we are looking after human trafficking in India as well. And for that, we are planning to open a Mano social hotline number in India, and also what Harold sir said about advisory council in India. Thank you.
Hey, Mayank, you're back.
I'm trying to sign out, so I'm not back.
Okay. I thought like, okay, Vienna Dixon, can you?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. I'm Fiona Dixon. I'm the Regional Director for Canada.
Your video is
and my video has been disabled, so
okay,
I won't be able to see on screen. But I came to Canada as a student, and I feel students do get exploited in Canada, or mostly South Asian community. So every time I meet a student, I try to tell them what not to do and what to do in Canada. I believe that is my motive, to help students get to where they want to be ahead. And Harold sir has been supporting me, helping me connect with delegates in Canada, so that we help each and everyone to be more empowered towards their life. Thank you.
Vyasi Gandhi, can you join in for a minute? But having said that, I think till she joins, or Emil Bar is there? Emil Bar?
Yes, sir. Emil is online with us.
Emil?
Yes, I am here, Harold.
Yes. I was just talking about you. You're our youngest. At the age of 15, you joined Eyes Open International, and you developed the website, and you've done a wonderful job. So, but I want you to share something of your views on human trafficking.
Absolutely. It's been a journey working with the OI and sort of exploring this issue and understanding it further has been just a huge part of my life over the last 2 years. I think that there's a lot of different, as was discussed in this panel, there's a lot of different facets to this issue. There's a lot of different areas where human trafficking is prevalent. But my work here and my work with Mr. D'Souza has really shown that by listening to victims, by focusing on survivors, that's really what's important here. Understanding people that have been through this horrible crime and listening to them, because to fight against this and make sure this doesn't happen to any other people. It's a very noble purpose, and it's a very meaningful and impactful cause.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you very much. And I would go back to Dr. PM Nair. I don't know, when you talk, you get the visual in front of you, like the audience and everybody. I just want you to share with our viewers today in India and globally, especially India, is that people are so crazy to come to the United States of America. I don't blame them, but come legally, or any country you go to, Canada or London, anywhere. So would you like to share some thoughts that do not come illegally paying the agents? Like people pay like 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, 50 lakhs to come. And what would you tell them? Like, and they're not coming legally. They're going through the border. Like they don't get a visa. They're going and they're coming through the border in the jungle, and out of 10, 8 do not make it.
I think you said it right. The issue of this sort of placement agencies, court placement agencies, is a very serious issue in India. Even a state with a lot of literacy in Kerala, many women and men are being trafficked to various countries through so-called placement agencies. I think one thinking is that there should be some sort of legislation to control them. But law by itself is so meaningless unless you educate the public and prevent this issue. So what we require is to sort of a lot of public awareness has to be created among the people who want to migrate. Migration is a right, let them do that. But when they do migrate, they have to be aware of their rights. I don't know, you've seen in the Kathmandu airport, now things are closed down because of COVID. When I used to travel, Kathmandu airport, there is one place says migrant visa. Others can walk in. For migrants, when the visa come, migrant visa, they come in and they make them sit there and speak to them for half an hour, 40 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours in the Nepali language, give them a booklet as to what their rights are. So that's very interesting. Maybe they could have done in a village, but they are doing in the airport. Fair enough. So this sort of awareness of the migrants is very important. When a Nepali migrant goes to India, that Nepali migrants gets an awareness in the airport at what her rights are, what his rights are. If that sort of awareness of the migrants' rights can be done, I would say an empowered migrant may be less susceptible for trafficking than another one. Therefore, this sort of a public awareness in those places where a vulnerability is there, number one. Number two, there is a need to control placement agencies by legislation, things like that. And last but not the least, who are the people who are susceptible? Is it lack of education? I mentioned about lack of awareness to rights, lack of access to rights. So all these parameters are very important. If in a small state like Mizoram today, lot many population are being trafficked not outside Mizoram but within Mizoram. Why so? Aizawl has become a capital of trafficking. Always we thought Mizoram is a very poor state and those people are so innocent. They are being trafficked to other states in the country. They are. At the same time, now I find a lot of trafficking into Aizawl itself. Who are these traffickers? So why this trafficking? That means a lot of issues happening there. Those things we need to understand the dimensions, and then we can take an action against those placement agencies and prevent the trafficking by creating sustained public awareness. Empowered migrant. I would call it empowered migrant. But my understanding, my philosophy, my research says migrant to bonded to trafficked. I call it a metamorphosis. A metamorphosis from migrant to bonded to trafficked.
PM, can I just jump in there and say, there's been a recent report that Caritas did about Nepalese trafficking, and 75% of those who had been in the end identified as being part of a unskilled migration movement, were actually only 1 year of secondary education, if that. Many not even any primary school education, not even literate. So when we get into these sort of, let's have posters, etc., in airports, as you realize, this is far too late, because they've already been actually captured, often by those who are uncles, who that grab these opportunities of taking kids, mainly kids, into this cycle of exploitation. And we haven't even started to talk about our other neighbors, China for forced marriage, Korea for forced marriage, thousands and thousands of Nepalese, thousands and thousands of your Indian missing children being recruited into that line of traffic, a traffic that is not allowed to be talked about. I mean, we have had occasion to have discussions with those working on this sort of work that, are completely excluded by the Chinese government, because they will not have this level of what is going on in China discussed. Or indeed, we haven't talked about what's happening in Qatar. We haven't talked about what's happening in Saudi Arabia in terms of recruitment into domestic servitude, sexual enslavement, forced labor. This is truly a global challenge, but we're focusing on the recruitment out of the Indian subcontinent and your neighbors. It's massive. It's masses. It's hundreds of thousands. It's hundreds of thousands.
Absolutely, no doubt. And fully endorse what you said.
And also between African nations and Europe, there's a huge transatlantic, human trafficking there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm just trying to focus on the Indian subcontinent.
No, I totally get it, Carrie. No, I get it. No, I'm just trying to say that it's such a global issue that it's not only, it's so difficult to just say, well, we can stem this and we can reduce it, but there are multilateral issues that have to be addressed. And that's, I think, the challenge, like you said so eloquently, that really is the challenge that we have globally in fighting human trafficking. But I thank you, Harald, for hosting
Yeah.
this. I know you're
Thank you.
at
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Kalyani Gopal, Dr. Carey, Dr. Nair, and of
Thank
course,
you.
John Richmond. But I would like to personally thank Manan Rawal, who is the founder of this Bharat FM, Ashish Jha, who is behind the screen and organizing all this thing goes well. And we have Mayank Chaya, who had to step out, and every individuals and every friends across the globe, and from the Department of State who agreed, and from the White House to do this event. And I don't know, like, just to thank you, Dr. Gopal, Dr. Carey, PM Nair, and Ambassador John Richmond, and how much you mean to me in my life. It means a lot, not only in my life, but even in the life of the victims and survivors, because many victims and survivors are watching today. And I think you all are inspiring. I got so many messages right now on my phone. Wow, what an event. Like, it is so enlightening, and people are like, that we have got a lot of power. Like, it was very enriching. So I'm giving you some feedbacks which I just got on the phone. So having said that, I just want to use some parting words. Thank you very much. God bless you. And thanks for joining this event of Eyes Open International. Please support us. We are active on the Eyes Open International Facebook page. Go and comment, help us. Go on the website. And you need anything, call us. Now you can call Dr. Carey, Dr. Gopal, and I would say Dr. PM Nair in India if you need any help. And always we are open at Eyes Open International. Thank you very much. Any parting words from Dr. Gopal and Dr. Carey and Dr. PM Nair for our audience, viewers?
Well, I just want to say that there's hope for survivors. There's advances we have in therapy where we don't have to do years and years and years of therapy and intergeneration transmission of trauma. You can actually do trauma treatment in 2 sessions to 10 sessions. It doesn't have to be so life damaging.
Thank you.
And I would say, I'm going to continue on my harping on about prevention. That everybody has their role to play in that, just as we have a role to play in addressing the pandemic. What are we supposed to do? Wear a mask when we're out in the environment, wash our hands. Why do we do it? Is it to protect ourselves? Well, yes, but actually more importantly, it's to protect others. And we just need to have this complete mind shift going on by the dominant majority, for whom the minority of the world who are trafficked actually become the focus, one of the focuses of how well are we doing? How healthy are we as a world society? How healthy are we when we've got at least 45 million people trafficked and enslaved? And that's the minimum.
Thank you. I don't know if Dr. PM Nair is there or he stepped out. But anyway, thank you very much. God bless you all. Vande Mataram, Mera Bharat Maan. Thanks.